Few businesses really have a diverse and effective set of key performance indicators that really indicate the direction and the indication of whether our business is on the incline or on the decline. Key performance indicators really are about giving those advanced warning systems. It's like a barometric pressure reading of your business. It's nice to know if the storm is coming rather than the storm's on us and now what are we going to do about it. So today we're going to talk about key performance indicators. What are they? What should we be tracking in our business? How do we go about tracking them? And what do we do with the information once we get it? You know, business owners every day are faced with decisions. Some of them very difficult, some of them easy. But throughout the day, it's really about making decisions. And what is more important than anything is understanding the decision should be an informed decision. Sometimes these decisions we make, they're emotional, they're just reactive. And what we hope to do is set up a structure within our organizations that we become proactive rather than reactive. All too often, we are addressing issues sort of once the horse is already out of the barn. So today we want to really address what are the things that we could and should be looking at, excuse me, that are going to help us understand and see the trends before they become problems, so that we can address those and sort of right the ship before it's too late. What it takes to run a business is incredibly difficult, right? I say there's really two reasons to own a business: to put so much at risk and so much effort into it. One is so that it runs smoothly and profitably while you own it. And two, that it's worth a life-changing amount when you sell it. And or that it's something that is a legacy that you'll hand to your children. Why else would we go through all this effort, all this risk, if it's not running smoothly and profitably, something that we enjoy doing, and also ultimately is worth perhaps a life-changing amount when we sell it? So again, this is about how do we get proactive about our business? What should we be looking at? Key performance indicators are leading indicators. If you want to see the result of your business, most of your reporting structures will provide that for you. Your P&L, that'll show you your results. But what we want to do is dig into really what are the components that create that result, and more to the point, get to the point where we can see the trends before they become a problem. So let's just start real quick with what is a KPI. Key performance indicator is a measurable value, typically expressed as a figure or percentage that demonstrates the organization's effectiveness at achieving its strategic objectives. So, you know, pretty straightforward definition there. It's got a nice wrapped up with a bow on the top of it. But what does that really mean? And what do we do with this? So, key part of this is strategic objective. Key performance indicators are always tied to our strategic objectives of the business. So let's take an example. One of the strategic objectives may be to increase our sales revenue by 45% over last year. All right, but the real question becomes, how do we do that? Are you going to shorten your sales cycle by half? Are you going to generate 50% more leads? Are you going to increase your lead conversion by 30%? Are you going to get repeat customers to buy 20% more? It's one thing to say, yeah, we're going to grow our business by 45%. Excuse me. The other is to ask, how will we accomplish that? And that's where these indicators come in. We've got, you know, if you're going to look at your sales cycle, then to have a sales KPI of the sales cycle to really see how that's going is really where we should be. From a lead generation standpoint, it's important to look at what are those leads coming in and where are they coming from? How many of those leads are we converting? We should have a KPI that shows that lead conversion rate. And getting repeat customers to buy more, perhaps we look at the average transaction and have a KPI on that. As we kind of dig more into dissecting that KPI, let's really look at those three terms. Key, a major contributor to the success or failure of the company's progress or strategic objectives. Therefore, it's only key when it can either make or break the objective. Performance, a metric that can be measured, quantified, adjusted, and controlled. And lastly, on that indicator, an easy to read and interpret representation of the present and future performance. Key piece there is easy to read and interpret. I want to take us back to our objective that we listed, to increase our revenue by 45% over last year. This diagram here today is not only insightful, but it's enormously powerful. I kind of refer to it as the 5 building blocks of profitability. So we really look at these 5 pieces, those listed in red, your leads that are generated, the conversion rate that you have with them, the number of transactions, the average transaction amount, and your margin. All too often, these are the 5 KPIs that a lot of businesses look at. And it sort of ends there. When you talk about know your numbers, this tends to be where the major focus is. How many leads am I generating? What is that conversion rate? But follow me on this, if you will. So we're looking down column A. So let's just say, hypothetically, you've got 500 leads coming in. Now, whether these numbers look like an annual number based to you, or this is a monthly, it's still applicable either way. But say we're generating 500 leads, we're converting 60% of those into customers. That provides us with 300 customers. If those 300 customers purchase from you twice in that given period, and they are spending $500 per transaction, you're going to get $300,000 in gross revenue. If you're carrying a 35% margin level, that's going to result in $105,000 in profit. Moving over to column B, and this is where the magic happens in this. What we're really talking about is in those 5 areas, if you're to increase those 5 areas by just 10%, you can see the dramatic result it has. So let's start with leads. You're generating 500. Is it feasible to believe that you can increase that by 10% or create 550? Yes, that's within reason. Conversion rate, you're converting 60. Can you increase it by 10% and get it up to 66? I believe that's possible too. That's going to result in an increase from 300 customers to 363 customers. Now, as opposed to them just purchasing from you twice, can we increase that by 10%? Meaning, on average, they're buying from you now 2.2 times. Yes, that's within reason. And if they're spending 500, can we get that market basket increased to 550? Within reason. The result of those areas is going to result from your gross revenue increasing from 300,000 to 439,000. That's a 46% increase in your gross revenue. And lastly, we'll look at margin. You're carrying a 35% margin. Could you get that up 10%? Could you get it to 38.5? Yes. Oftentimes, a 10% increase in a product really goes unnoticed by the consumer or the customer. So it is possible to get that increase to 38.5, and as a result, your gross profit is going to go from 105,000 to 169. The real power of this is understanding that just adjusting those 5 areas by 10% is going to increase your gross revenue by 46% and your net profitability by 61%. That's amazing just in itself. But tying this back to the objective, the point is, if we're going to increase our revenue by 45%, how are we going to go about that? And how would we know whether that's a realistic projection going forward? It's by looking at the indicators. Whatever the number was last year, we understand that we're going to have to do more of that this year. But really, where are those adjustments? And they come from leads, they come from that conversion rate, they come from the transaction amount, that market basket or average transaction, and your gross revenue. So it is by having these numbers in place that you can begin to understand that if you create that strategic objective of that increase, that it's feasible and you know about how to go about it. All of those numbers that we looked at, those are really the metrics of the business. Those are the quantifiable, measurable numbers within the business. But oftentimes the term KPI and metric are used interchangeably and incorrectly. So just real quick, KPI is a metric, but a metric is not always a KPI. A little bit of a wordplay there, but to the point, a KPI is always tied to the organization's strategic objectives. Metrics are detailed measures that feed and augment the KPI, and the KPI reflects strategic value drivers, while metrics represent anything that is measurable. And while we're sort of defining terms, benchmark is another term that's oftentimes misused. A benchmark is really best-in-class performance achieved by a specific business or an activity. It's a performance level that's achieved by other organizations that can be used to establish improvement goals. And note, The term business or benchmark is often used incorrectly to refer to an average performance, and sometimes it's referring to a minimum acceptable standard. That is not a benchmark. So it's just care should be taken when using the term benchmark to understand that it's really best in class. So why do we need KPIs? Well, we've talked a little bit about that, but first of all too often business owners are really focused on the top line and the bottom line. And that becomes really the focus, and that becomes the message that's delivered throughout the company. We need to increase our sales, we need more profitability, but there's much more to it than that. KPIs look at the leading indicators of sustainable long-term performance. KPIs provide a more granular view of the company performance and is focused on monitoring these performance indicators. Key point there is they are monitoring along the way. It's not just the result we're getting, but let's monitor the result. If you're halfway through the year, but you're only 30% of your sales goal, if you're not monitoring that along the way, that example is one that typically gets our eyes. But there are many other detailed levels within a business that are not monitored, and it's only until the result is in play and it's a substandard result that we start to go, now what are we going to do about it? And again, it provides a more holistic view of the business's progress. To the old adages that Kurt talked about, and Peter Drucker quotes, you can't manage what you don't measure, right? And not only that, what gets measured gets managed and gets improved. Kurt talked about weight or a golf game. If you're not focused on dropping a few pounds, you're rarely stepping on the scale. Or if you do, it's just a check, right? But the day you start to say, boy, I really want to drop a few pounds, that's the day you step on the scale. It's by measuring that, it's by getting that initially. It's just human nature that once we measure something, it tends to improve. If you're getting in shape for the marathon coming up, say you're going to run that half marathon this year. If you're just out running and you're understanding that your cardio is getting better and you're able to run longer distances, that's one thing. But the day you start measuring, how long does it take me to run a mile? The day you start saying, I'm running 10-minute miles. By nature of knowing that it's a 10-minute mile, you just have human nature is to try to improve upon that, even if it's just by a little bit. So there is some real wisdom in the fact that what gets measured gets improved. As I said earlier, businesses are always dealing with issues. I refer to these sort of as PICs: problems, issues, concerns, suspicions. Some of these are complex and very difficult to address. Some are not as difficult. But constantly we're dealing with problems in our business. So, real simple little analogy here. And just have a little fun with this. So, we're going to look at a potential problem in a business, and the question is, does it move? Well, the first thing we need to ask ourselves is yes or no. If it does not move, the next thing we have to ask ourselves is, should it move? Well, if it doesn't move and it shouldn't move, no problem, right? But if it doesn't move and it should move, what's the solution to that problem? A little WD-40, right? Fixes everything. Now, conversely, on the other side, does it move? Yes, it does. So the next question we have to ask ourselves is, should it? Well, we're saying it does move and it should move. Again, no problem. But if it does move and it shouldn't, what's the solution to that problem? Any ideas? Duct tape is right. Absolutely. That certainly wouldn't it be great if all of our business problems were solved so easily. And certainly this might solve some operational issues and maybe even some employee issues, right? But the fact is that our problems are much more complex than that. So we look at starting to develop KPIs and implement those into our business. So just a real cursory overview of that process. Step one, decide what to measure. Collect the data. Calculate the data. Report that result. That's where the KPI comes into play. Analyze the result. Take action and rinse and repeat, right? KPIs also carry some problems with them and or some inherent problems. KPIs, sometimes we will create a KPI that's just not related or relevant to the business or the work being performed. The rate of change sometimes for the KPI is too slow to produce a result that's actionable. Look at something like lifetime value of a customer. That's a long process, not really what would be considered a KPI or something that is one of those quickly actionable, let's change the course of this. So there's certainly things that we should be looking at and really focused on as a KPI. Others are just metrics that we should be aware of. Turnaround time for actions needed to correct low-performing KPIs take too long. The responses or processes needed to deal with the KPI indicating a problem either don't exist or are inadequate. KPIs are too loosely monitored by frontline managers, and as opposed to being shared with the entire team. The situation with KPIs, and we'll talk about this a little bit more, but these are not something that the manager or the top level person should be owning and keeping to themselves. Really, this needs to permeate throughout the organization, because it's really at the worker level that sometimes the innovation, the suggestions, the improvement ideas, that's where they come from. And obviously, too many KPIs just results in overwhelm. We don't know really what we're looking at. It's just too much. It's confusion and noise. So really, the focus is about keeping your eye on the vital few and not the trivial many. KPI types, just real quick. There are quantitative indicators. These are things that can be measured and presented numerically. Qualitative, these are things that can't be measured. Things like employee satisfaction, customer satisfaction. Those certainly are things that we can qualify, hard to quantify. Input indicators really talk about the usage of resources during an existing project or an objective. Process indicators really used to look at the overall efficiencies of our process. Output indicators looking to demonstrate the outcome or the result of the process. Practical interface indicators interface with existing company policies. Example of that might be if you are a warehouse worker with Amazon and you are charged with, and you're an order picker, you're charged with picking an item every 15 seconds. That's the kind of indicator that ties in with the larger corporate numbers, which provide the result of what Amazon is trying to accomplish. And directional indicators just really indicating whether the company's objectives are improving or not. Basic rules for developing a KPI. Really focus on your desired outcome. Keep the metric simple. Involve all participants. Base the metric on strategic objectives and challenge employees to act immediately. So how do you go about doing this? How do you define what to measure? Well, one of the ways you can look at it is, what are your customers are saying are important? That's always a good indication of something that you should really be keeping your eye very focused on. What are they saying that's a problem in your business? What feedback are you getting? Those are areas that you could create improvements in, and it's important to your customer. Obviously, what we want to do is not only attract those customers, but we want to retain those customers. And to our examples before, we want those customers buying more and more as time goes on. Measure where you're seeing the problems. Certainly, we're aware of the problems within our business. If there's a problem, there's an opportunity to not only create a KPI, but also to start engineering the solution to that. And again, measure the strategic business objectives you're aiming to achieve. Another way of kind of looking at this, the KPI development process really starts with your overall business strategy. What is the company trying to accomplish? So it really leads into the next step, goals and objectives. What are the short and long-term objectives of achieving the strategy? Moves into those key business objectives. What are the important actionable steps that we need to take to accomplish the goal or objective? Then we create the key performance indicator, which are really tied to those objectives, and then we look at the supporting metrics. Another way to look at your KPIs, kind of a litmus test on this, is to bounce it against the SMART model. Again, the KPI needs to be specific, it needs to be clear and focused towards that performance target. It needs to be measurable, something that can be expressed quantitatively. It needs to be attainable. It needs to be reasonable and achievable. Of course, it needs to be relevant. It needs to be directly tied and pertinent to the company's strategic objectives. And again, as always, it needs to be time-based. So real quick, we're going to go through the 10 characteristics of a good KPI. And again, a good KPI really would possess all 10 of these traits. One of the things I'm just going to say here is this presentation I'm going to provide to Kurt, and he's going to send it out to you. So I've really written this presentation in a way that once you get it and maybe look at it down the road, as opposed to sort of keeping with the standard PowerPoint presentation methodologies, which is sort of the 6x6 rules. No more than 6 bullets on a page, no more than 6 words in a bullet. What I've done here is I've spelled this out a little bit more so that one day when you're reading this, you can make sense of it rather than just trying to interpret what the truncated message is trying to communicate. So number 1, KPIs reflect the strategic value drivers. We've talked about this. They represent the activities that facilitate that future success. They move you towards the objective. And again, these value drivers are not financial metrics. Rather, they reflect how well the company is doing in areas that impact the financial measurements, such as profitability and revenue. And again, these are leading indicators rather than lagging indicators. Number 2, KPIs are defined by executives. The executives define the value drivers in the strategic planning process. Executives don't always just mean top-level executives. This can be departmental managers or regional presidents, directors, managers, supervisors. All of those fit in the context of when we're talking about the term executives in this context. Executives determine the long and short-term strategy and strategic direction of the company. They define how to measure the performance, and all too often, one of the things that breaks down is we get together as a management team and we begin to try to define things, and that meeting either breaks down, we run out of time, and the next thing you know, the mission was not accomplished. Number 3, KPIs cascade throughout the organization. Department managers need to conduct strategic planning sessions as their own to identify their group department objectives. Value drivers and goals are largely defined and handed down from the group higher in the hierarchy. This is oftentimes where the strategic planning process breaks down. We get together as senior level management, we decide this is what we need to accomplish, and we just arbitrarily roll that out to the group. But until your department managers, your directors can support the fact that they've got the resources, they've got the budget, they've got the manpower to accomplish this, all too often we'll just roll out these objectives that are not within the realm of the department to carry it out. And that's really something that as you do your own strategic planning, that you really do not only push it down from the top down, but also get that information coming up from the bottom up. But in every case, the group's value drivers or KPIs are tied back to the overarching company's objectives. And top-level KPIs cascade throughout the organization, and the data is often collected at those lower levels and those lower groups within the group, within the company. Number 4, they're based on company standards. This is one of those areas too that gets very, very confusing at times. The company has to establish what is considered their standards. And again, it can be deceptively hard. It can take months or weeks to really work out what you mean by either something such as net profit and or customer. And I throw this example in here. It's reported that there was a major airline that really sat down and was going to really define what are their standards, and just trying to identify flight or segment and putting general consensus to that was the breakdown. So really it took a long period of time before they really defined those standards and applied it back to really what is a flight, what is a segment, so as we do our strategic planning, we understand what those segments mean. And again, only with enough top-level support do you really break through those political obstacles that can keep that from happening. Number 5, they're based on valid data. This is also an area of real challenge for a lot of companies. Sometimes we know what we'd like to measure, but we really don't have the technology and the reporting capabilities that can support it. So again, we want to, knowing what to measure and actually measuring it, 2 different things. Many companies already have industry standards that can kind of tell you where those benchmarks are. Six Sigma is one of those areas that can be utilized. Executives need to ask the technical analysts, the IT department, does this data exist? And whether it's accurate enough to really deliver valid results. And if the data doesn't exist, the question really needs to become, Do we have the funds? Can we allocate funds to either capture new data, clean dirty data, and or just revise the KPI because we don't have the reporting capabilities to really support the results we need to see. And of course, if it comes back to needing to capture data and or clean the dirty data, looking at estimates can give you a good idea whether that's something you should move forward. 6, KPIs must be easy to comprehend. This is really what it's about. If they're complex, complicated, hard to understand, hard to read, hard to act on, typically it's just a metric that's in place or a KPI that's in place that doesn't get acted on. So again, this is about not only creating something that's easy to understand, but it's about rolling it out to people on the front lines who are really going to be measured by those results. And it's about making sure that those people are trained and understand what it takes to not only understand the performance, but what they need to do to take action. Again, they need to be relevant. They need to be looking at what is going to boost the performance of the business. KPIs need to be looked at frequently. Over time, KPIs lose their impact and need to be revised. And it's a good idea to, once you have your KPIs in place, to review those on a quarterly basis. KPIs provide context. This is really one of the most important pieces about it. You know, your numbers, your metrics will reflect your performance, but KPIs put it in context. KPIs evaluate performance according to the expectation. They indicate the direction of performance, whether we're going up, down, remaining static, and the context is provided by things like thresholds. What are those upper and lower ranges of acceptable performance? Targets, based on predefined goals, such as an increase in your customers per quarter, and benchmarks, again, those measures that are widely based on best performances. Number 9, they empower the user. Once these are in place, now employees know really what we're looking at, what they're being measured on. That's what's absent so often in business and in small companies, is the fact that employees don't know what they're being measured on. So one of the ways that we help them understand is to identify the KPIs within their group so that they can be focused on what's important and what the company has deemed important. And oftentimes, you're going to have to revise these KPIs. And again, one of the problems is if you've created a KPI and you don't have the ability to collect the data, it's not relevant, or you've got too many of them, really the result of that, employees and or frontline people become a bit cynical about it and a bit discouraged. And lastly, KPIs lead to positive action. They should always generate the intended action, right? Improved results. It's important that you don't allow your groups to generate KPIs in isolation. And one of the examples of this might be if you're a retail store and you're focused on out of stocks, yet your distribution center is focused on keeping minimum inventory levels, those two can conflict. So again, this is about understanding from an overarching strategy, what are we really trying to accomplish, and so that groups don't, in isolation, create their own KPIs that don't necessarily support the bigger goal. And again, KPIs are one of those things that is a bit human nature, that once they're in place, we as human beings tend to find what's the easier, softer way. How can we circumvent this? How can we do this with less time? So we've got to be careful about that. And again, what you don't want to do is roll out a KPI that is not vetted. Particularly if you're going to add an incentive to that, make sure that you've vetted this KPI, make sure that you understand that you've got the performances in place, and again, closely monitor those to ensure that they're actually producing the result. I got 2 last slides that I want to show you, and then we'll move to our panel. Once you've identified your KPIs and you've got the data, how do you display it? How do you roll it out to your team in that way that's easy to read, easy to understand? We look at scorecards and dashboards. I'm going to start with this scorecard. This is a scorecard that I created. I moved here back to Fargo, which is where I was born and raised, about almost 2 years ago now. But the prior 8 years, I was a business coach in Dallas. And I also was a dental consultant. I had a separate company, Prosperity Dental Partners. And this dental, and I don't think we have any dentists in this group, but you know, one of the things that we find most prevalent in a dental practice and possibly other clinical practices is that the doctors are clinicians, right? And in the case of dentistry, they really see themselves almost as artists, you know? Cosmetic dentistry is one of those things that is not just about fillings and extractions and crowns. So the focus oftentimes with dentists is really about production. We talk about that scenario where business owners are focused on top line and bottom line, really prevalent in the dental industry. Their metrics that they focus on first is production. How much production are we doing, and how much of that production are we collecting, right? So, but when you really break it down, there's so many more components that go into dentistry, and again, dentists not necessarily focused on the business aspect of their practice. Therefore, those are the kinds of things that often go unnoticed. So by creating a scorecard and creating KPIs, and I'm going to use this dental example as that, but just looking at production, you know, what we're talking about here is what are those production amounts? Of course, we want to know what they are. In this scenario, in this practice that I worked with, there were 2 doctors, 2 hygienists. When we look at, it's good to know what are each of the doctors producing, what are each of the hygienists producing, and what does that roll to an average? Again, using industry standards say that in the dental world, doctors should be producing about 75% of the production, hygiene about 25%. So it's good to have these measures in place to see if we're really on pace with those sort of industry standards. Provider stats, just looking at the doctors and hygienists, how many hours are they available, how many of those hours that are there are unscheduled, how many patients are they seeing, what's the production per patient, production per hour, and a little tight on the eyes because that production per day, right? Profit and loss. Of course, we want to be looking at profit and loss. We want to look at what we budgeted and what we actually came in, and where those percentages are. Collection. What's really happening? How much of the collection is coming from patients? How much is coming from insurance? Expenses. We're looking at the DPO. This is the daily production output. You know, really sort of identifying to hit our goal, what would we have to do on a given day? That becomes sort of the metric that we're trying to shoot for. It was determined that to hit this revenue number on a given day, we're going to need to create $4,000 as a daily production output. And again, having those metrics in place, having the KPI tells us, are we achieving that? Are we achieving that on a daily basis? That's going to feed our monthly result, it's going to feed our quarterly result, feed our annual result. It's good to look at procedures. What are we really doing? What's driving? How many bridges versus crowns versus extractions versus cleanings, fillings, all of those things. Looking at what did we do last month? What really drove the result that we've gotten? And then looking at January over January. What did we do last year? What are we doing this year? Receivables, treatment plans. Again, not only are doctors focused on production and collection, but they're also focused on how much of the treatments that we're suggesting to patients are being accepted by patients. And lastly is a scorecard. So we've got, again, putting this information into a graphical form, obviously very easy way to read and interpret. So again, we're just looking at whatever those metrics are and creating these visual dashboards that are reported and presented to the team so that they can look at it. You know, looking at year-to-date numbers, how are the different sales reps, or in this case, doctors versus hygiene, how are they doing? How are we doing versus last year versus goal versus our actual results this year? Again, one of the things that's problematic in the dental industry is how much adjustments are we giving? How much free dentistry are we giving away? All those adjustments are taken away right from bottom line profits. New patients versus existing patients. Real important metric in dentistry, because existing patients are really just on a maintenance plan. It's the new patients that get the large treatment plans, and that's where the bigger dollars come from. That bottom right left-hand group is one that really is a standout on this chart. They, in this particular practice, had established what was called the BBM, the bare butt minimum. That's the number we need to hit on a monthly basis, not only from a collection standpoint, but from a production standpoint of collection. So to have that sort of graphically laid out, that's the red line across there, and then we can graphically easily see whether we're hitting those numbers or not. So again, identifying the KPIs and putting all the metrics in place, making sure you have the data that supports it, that data is valid, that's one thing. Now we need to display it and share it throughout the organization. That's what this is really about. And again, this is about warding off issues. Yes?
Just interesting listening to everything, Brian. My type of business, in case you don't know, I'm Tracy Green with Green Team Realty. I'm a broker, owner, and I don't have employees. I have independent contractors. That fun word, independent. So have you taken this style of metrics or KPIs and worked with a real estate company with people who perform based on what they want to perform?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I have. In the last year, I've worked with about 9 real estate agents. And one of the things that I continue to see, sort of what we talked about, focused on either top line or bottom line, right? How many homes am I selling? Their metrics might be what's the average home price, what's my commission rate, and how much am I putting in my bank, right? But it really goes deeper than that. What I really brought to most of the agents that I worked with is, again, if we want to put $100,000 in our bank at the end of the year, we have to reverse engineer this. We have to understand that, yes, based on your commission rate, the number of homes that you sell, what is the average price, but it really rolls up to how many leads are you generating. Somewhere along the line, there is a metric between how many, and in the case of real estate, it's really how many cold leads are we generating that become warm leads. Those warm leads can be identified as, I now have their contact information, they know me, and I have them in my database, right? Then the next step is booking an appointment, actually going out and sitting down with them and getting them to have you as their exclusive representative. The next is to actually list the home and get that and have a contract in place with that. The last is then to actually sell it. So as you look back at the metrics, and one of the things that I was kind of seeing is it took about 100 cold leads to get somewhere around 10 warm leads, and that rolled down. There was a, once you have those warm leads, high percentage of those actually did convert into customers or clients. So it was looking at whether you're an independent agent or whether these are numbers pushed out. The bottom line is, if you want to put 100,000 in your bank, you have to look at the mechanism, the components that go into that, and that's really so much what I saw missing.
So in other words, like with my team, you do it with all of them so that I know I'm profitable, because otherwise I can't run the company unless they are.
Exactly.
Because that's where I've hit a wall here, is like I'm spending a lot of money on leads.
Yes.
Like a ton of them.
Yes.
And $100,000 for leads in a company my size is a lot.
Absolutely.
And so I got to see that return, and it's hard to figure out all that stuff you were just talking about. So we might have to have a conversation.
I would love to. And one of the things that you really see from this process too, particularly if you make this visible across all the different agents, is you'll see those conversion rates. How many warm leads or cold leads am I converting into leads? How many of those am I converting into contracts? When you start to see that this person has a much higher conversion rate in those areas versus this one, now we can start digging into best practices. What are you doing different than I? And once we start to identify those things that the top performers are doing, those who are still struggling to hit those levels can learn from those things. So we'd love to sit down and talk about
top on that, that's where you want to make the competition. A little friendly competition goes a long way when you're trying to make your bottom line and be profitable. So that's what Jeremy and Vince have done, and Jeremy probably will talk about it too, with competition, rewards, incentives among the salespeople on our floors, where they recognize that, oh, Bernard's doing a little bit better than me. I need to step it up. I need to call a few more people. I need to do this and that. So that's huge.
It is. And if you've got salespeople that don't like competition, you might have the wrong people in those positions, right?
Well, but what's interesting is, your salespeople are paid employees.
Yeah, but along the line, though, we benefit from their production. I mean,
No, I know that.
you're a sales organization at the end of the day. Right?
I am, but they're 1099. So it's a decision whether I keep them in the company or not based on performance. That's what I'm kind of looking at. I mean, I can't, it's a little different with independent because,
Slightly.
yeah.
It's a mindset then. So then you work
Right.
on the mindset.
Well, and my thing is they're either working or they're not. This is a surefire way to find out.
Right? Surefire.
So up to about 6 years ago, I didn't know what a KPI was really. So as a technician background, KPIs were kind of always in place because efficiency, productivity, all those things were always drilled into our heads because that's what we were paid as commissioned mechanics. I always watched that for the techs that I had hired, but I didn't realize that it was how I drove my business really. I've broken down over the years, you know, we're into daily, weekly, and monthly KPIs that I look at, and it's broken down to each team member's role in our business as well. You know, like so my service supervisors and managers have certain KPIs that we watch weekly, monthly, daily. You know, they're based on their goals and such as like that. So an advisor might have their average repair order, their gross profit, how many cars they need to have into that day, that week, that month to hit their goals. And then those are measured and brought back to them so they know where they're at and where they're headed. You know, a technician might be how efficient they are, which is basically, you know, efficiency is based on if a job takes this long and we build this much, that's how efficient they are. The production is how many hours they produce versus how many they work. And then I take that and go one step further and turn it into an effective labor rate. And basically what that is how many hours we produced versus how many dollars we sold. So you could charge $100 an hour, but you might only be effective to 70. So that's what you're really collecting per hour. And that's something that I learned and opened my eyes. So, you know, obviously we need to be better efficiencies and things like that. So, some of the weekly things, obviously we look at the efficiency production, we set our goals. I look at inventory usage to adjust things like that. I look at like our marketing people, you know, they have goals. We look at what, for every $1,000 we spend, how many people we get from that, and what the conversion is and how much some people spend, how long are the customers, and we make those decisions to change our marketing plan. So I mean, all those pieces kind of come into that. You know, monthly sales goals, and I can break it down by what kind of vehicles I work on, how old they are, what zip code they come from, what part of that zip code they come from, and I can use that to determine my marketing pieces. Accounts receivable, you know, what areas of cars that we work on are we most profitable in. It might be brake jobs compared to engine replacements. You know, we know exactly what kind of work we really want in the shop to make us as profitable as we can be. You know, how our discounts and coupons are utilized, what kind of payment types we take, you know, are our credit cards effective that we offer, you know, how much training is completed by our staff and what that means. I'm trying to think of anything else. You know, our equipment, you know, our shop supplies that we use, what vendors we buy the most parts from, and are we getting the best deals there? And I can use that to say, hey, we bought this many parts, we should be getting a better deal. You know, that's something I'm constantly looking at, so we make sure that our customers get the best price, but also affects our profitability as well. So those are a lot of the main things I look at weekly, daily, and monthly. So.
Matt, how do you keep track of that? Like, do you have software programs? Are they proprietary to your business, or how have you kept track of those things?
Yeah, we have a shop management program that does a lot of that. You know, our management program has, you know, time clocks, everything built into it, and then that integrates into QuickBooks, and then I can really kind of see all the pictures from there too. But there are other programs out there, I believe, that do a lot of that stuff too. So.
One thing that I have a question for that I'm kind of struggling with a lot is, you know, advertising. It almost seems like you're just throwing it out in certain areas. And you said that you try to track that. What method are you trying to use to kind of track that? I mean, as far as are people coming in and saying, hey, I saw your ad on this, or hey, I heard you on this, or what's the, I guess, how you track that?
That was an ongoing thing that took a lot of training for our staff. They have to, I mean, they fail at their job, they don't ask that question. Okay. That's one of the key components I had to train them to their process. And we're very process driven. Okay. And I'm constantly training that process, so they have to understand that that's one of the key first things that they ask. I mean, it's right after like name, address, phone number, email, how did you hear about us? Okay. You know, and the nice thing is I've set our system now, so it won't let them go to put the car in until they ask where they came from. And then I can break it down so we can actually, if they came from a friend, then it'll pop up another box, type in the friend's name, it'll tell us if it's a customer, how much they've spent, everything. So then we can send a referral thank you to that customer as well. So now we're doing 2 different marketing pieces at the same time. So, but it comes down to, I think, honestly, just the training. I mean, and it's not an overnight thing.
Yeah.
Software does that, right? Your software pops up those questions.
Yeah, that was something I actually requested that it be added, and I think it took 20 requests, but they finally did it, so.
But predicated on asking the question, how did you hear about us?
Yeah. And you could have an Excel spreadsheet at the bottom, on the bottom of their screen and just, have a note on their monitor saying, how did you come to us today?
Yeah.
Then you know what marketing pieces are working or not.
Okay. Yeah, because if I was struggling on that, I mean, I'm not much of a discount-driven, store, so I hate to, give out coupons and, then obviously take the hit on our end, but at least we know where it came from. But, yeah, I could see how that policy would procedure would get in place.
What's your store? What kind of business do you have?
Audio garage, so it's anything like mobile electronics, window tinting, stuff like that nature.
How do you get your leads then?
Honestly, a lot of it is just down to customer service. I mean, I'd say that the majority of how the business is growing in general is just people coming in and saying, my friend had something done with you. 10 years ago you did our vehicle, now our son is getting a new car. A lot of it has definitely been customers just coming in. And I mean, obviously we dabble in the radio advertising and social media in general, but I'd say the majority of it is, definitely referrals. So we want to see how we can kind of grow that out of just existing.
I hear our next meeting, Kurt, how to get leads, marketing, and advertising.
There you go. Yeah. I thought you were smiling because this is my Phil Donahue pose.
Yeah.
I got a question, Matt. Can you clarify that how exactly you set up and explain a little bit further? When you said you might bill $100, but you only get $70 effectively from it?
That was an example, but so basically, like if you have 5 technicians and they produce 245 hours are available work for them to work, they work 245 hours in a week. 5 days, 5 techs, 45 hours a week, 245 hours. If they produce, let's just say, $20,000 in labor, you take that 20,000 divided by 245 hours, whatever that number is actually what you're actually collecting for every hour that they're there. And that's what your effective rate is. And that's more important than what you charge, because if you're not efficient, you're not doing that, it doesn't matter what you charge. You can charge $200 an hour, but if you're only collecting 70, you're not really doing yourself any justice there.
How do you mark that? I know you're very successful at what you do with Christian Business Furniture, so.
No, well, we just added to our scorecard our labor variance, so we're trying to track our labor efficiency. We know what we charge, but how effective are we, and how much of their time is being billed, right? How much of their time is truly being billed.
Like for my business, my inventory is mainly my labor, and if it's once it's gone, it's gone. I can't bring it in tomorrow. I can't sell it tomorrow. So being mindful of that every single day is really why I look at this stuff so importantly, because I can't get it back. So.
And have you been able to determine what is an acceptable labor rate?
Well, our industry is like 90%.
Okay,
If billable.
got it,
Hey,
yes.
if they forget to bring something to a job, or they got to run back for a tool, or leave a tool at a place, all that is wasted time. So now we're tracking it, and they're aware of it. So.
Says Roger Christensen Business Furniture.
Every industry has a very different effect, as far as effective, but also what's their standard or whatever. Like for my business, effective technician's 80% efficient. To me, that's a failure. We strive for 120%. And our guys average between 90 and 100 collectively out of 12 guys. So.
To Roger's point though, what gets measured gets improved, right? Until you start measuring it and making people aware, hey, we're measuring this now.
They need to be aware.
They need to be aware.
Well, one step further, and maybe that's more of an indicator. We know, all our jobs now are being calculated based on how much time it should take to deliver 5 chairs or 500 chairs, one desk versus this, etc.
Yep.
So now they know going into a job, if they have 78 hours to do it, now we've got a measurable. If they do it in 70 or if they do it in 92.
And
So-
were they the ones that gave you the time frame that it would take to build that chair, to put that desk together, to take it from the truck into the room and finish?
It's industry standard formulas put together.
Oh, gosh.
Very.
Do your techs
Difficult.
know what's expected of them? Like, do they know that this pays 7 hours? We expect it done in at least that time?
That's what we're doing now. So every
Oh.
job they get, they know the hours and the order, how long it should take.
Have you, I've suggested that some similar situation, I'm a mechanical contractor, but I have pushback from our upper end thinking the guys will try to cut corners to beat that number and reduce warranty problems and issues down the road. That they beat it today, they did that 7-hour job at 5, but you had to go back 3 months from now and redo what they did, and it cost you another 5 hours.
That ends up all being charged back to the job for us, so it goes back against our efficiency. So we take it back to the original job.
How do you pay them then? I mean, does it come back out of their paycheck or
Not at this point.
no?
So that's what we're trying to build in now, the
Right.
incentives.
Not yet.
Not yet. Well, we need to figure out how to incent them, because we know they can work fast, and they should work fast.
You gotta hold them accountable. I think that's the first step. You know, you gotta tell them this is what I expect, you know, and you gotta hold them accountable for what you expect and your standards of the company. So if they're gonna cut corners, they're probably not gonna have a job, are they?
No.
I mean, that's what it comes down to. I mean, if I have guys cutting corners, they'd be not working for me.
And there's always
It's
gonna
black
be
and
a leeway
white.
on time. I mean, you know, certain things happen, but if it's two mechanics that are always getting sent back, or somebody's always going back to fix their jobs over time, that would start to tell.
Right.
Yeah. And if you let everybody know that, okay, here's our 12 people, here's 2 people, we have to go back and fix 80% of their jobs. They would either step it up or be gone. So that comes back to accountability.
To maybe help you a little bit too, like we post our text hours, but they're not posted by their names, so they don't, like both of our stores are combined into one sheet, so there's 12 employee numbers. Nobody knows who the other person is. It shows their billable hours, their efficiency, everything. Then it takes on even further, it'll show if they had a comeback or recheck, whatever it might be. For us, if you have 1 in 6 months, that's a failure. So I mean, we hold our staff to very high standards, and for that part of it, you know, it's funny to see kind of how guys start bouncing around because they don't want to be at the bottom. You know, and it might, they just had a bad week, whatever, but it's fun to see somebody go from the top to, or the bottom to number 2 in a month's time. You know, and what happens with that is everybody starts to win that. So,
That would actually be for you too.
Well, I know, I was just thinking assigning an employee number, because putting the names on there, you know, it's interesting saying create a competition. That can piss some salespeople off, especially in my line of business, that they're compared to other people. I like where it's anonymous. That's like awesome, because they hate being at the bottom, and I like that. So I'm gonna assign a number, they'll know who they are, but nobody else will know who they are.
Yeah.
you also won't make anybody feel bad.
Right, I don't want
Very
anybody
sensitive
feeling bad,
in
it's,
some areas.
yes. We're dealing with different personalities, you know, so, yeah.
Some people don't need that recognition, some people do, so
Yeah.
it's different
Yeah.
that way.
We take a different approach. We put the names on the board. There's a portal where they can go in and see, compare each other. So if the guy in Granite Forks made a sale today, the guy in Minot says, I better get to work here today. So that's how we create a competition.
Yeah.
You want competition, but still keep teamwork. Like in your industry, you're gonna get a lot of cutthroat perhaps, people stealing leads, people.
Yeah, and we're a
You
team.
gotta walk
I
that
need
line.
to keep the team. Like, I need to keep that lovely and friendly and playing in the sandbox together.
Since it's in your name, Green Team
It's
Realty.
kind of fits, yeah. So I can't get anybody that says it's, okay, yeah, it's interesting.
So Russell, how about you?
So I'm going on our 4th year in business. We're still in about 3 years, but it would have been last year, this year in December. I was sitting in my desk, and normally December I use that month to do my goals and planning, and I have no problem getting that done in December. But this December, I was getting interrupted a lot by these things called customers. They were calling me a lot, and they were saying, you know, I haven't heard much about you. What do you do? One thing that we've done is that, you know, with Harlem's coaching on identifying your big rocks, one thing for me, I would be in the field doing the analysis, coming back up, writing reports to my people I work with at the table. Nancy normally handles the office stuff. But I would have to spend all my time selling and coming back, writing up the report, and that's what my time was. But bringing on another technician, he's able now to do the field reports, come in and do the reports themselves, where I can actually focus more time on selling. One thing we'll be doing this afternoon is increasing our marketing. Our marketing has been word of mouth, and that's, it's good, but it's slower growth. And our business is a niche. We work with residentials, we work with commercial customers, but also industrial, and helping them save energy, improve their air conditioning, their heating, their lighting, their insulation, whatever that would be. So when a person still calls, they're still trying to figure out, okay, what's the difference between you and a Lunseth of the world? For me, I've been in the industry for over 30 years, but I'm still, when things get tough for me, I always want to reach back to that point where I can go out and sell service, because that's where I've been for 30 some years. But our business is consulting. We try to stay third party to where we hire contractors to work with us. So those are things that we continue to track. Right now, for this year, our growth plan is a 35% growth, and that's going to come by me being able to spend more time on sales. That's what I like doing. I like selling, and I like working with customers on showing them where they can improve their facility. So that's what I like doing. And so with Nancy and also Jake being able to take some of that load, that gives me more time on the sales. The one thing with our marketing will be, like, if you go into our website right now, there's not a whole lot of things there, but it's going to be start seeing a lot more testimonials from our customers, a little bit more of the jobs that we have done, so people can actually start seeing what it is that we do. So when they do call us, they have a little bit of a better idea of what we do. So, again, with my time being more in sales, bringing us more than marketing, that 35% growth should be attainable. And one thing that we're looking at to do probably soon is to expand into the Bismarck Minot area, because again, we are starting to get a lot of calls from customers. But a good example of a good customer is a restaurant owner. They call and they're looking to cut costs on paper plates or napkins or whatever that would be. But we had a call from a customer here in Fargo. He wanted to see how he could save energy in his restaurant. He owns 7 different restaurants, and the analysis that we did, he was saving about $400 a month on one restaurant. So that was, it went to $3,000 a month savings for his restaurants. And that was just changing the disciplines of his employees. They came in at 8 o'clock, they turned all their TVs on, but there's nobody sitting there. So let's turn those TVs on at 11 o'clock instead of 8 o'clock. So those are just different things that we did with that restaurant. And it was surprising to me too, how much actually they were actually saving by just changing their discipline. So those are kind of different things that we are still kind of getting those words out of what the value we bring to our customers. But those more time on sales, more time on marketing, and then also reaching more of our customers. I feel that 35% growth should be very attainable.
Russell, are you the only salesperson?
I am the only salesperson. Yes, I am. We are. I feel that we're all salespeople, but I do. Yeah.
Sounds like you need another salesperson.
What's that?
I mean, I looked at, when I was listening to you, I'm like, wow, I would love to go sell that. You know what I mean? You need a salesperson. Because marketing's great, but you'll spend potentially, I mean, I'm sure you're getting some business consulting, but I've been in sales my whole life, and to walk in the door and be able to say that to somebody, that I can save you $3,000 a month, wow. Like, that's amazing.
Yeah, and the thing that for our business, when we first started, is like, who's your target audience? To me, it's like whoever calls, and so that was kind of that approach. And then, a lot of times we were doing a lot of cold calling, but now where people understand what it is that we do, we're starting to get those calls now. So we're able to kind of give that story about what it is that we do. So a salesperson would definitely be probably our next person in line, or a project manager.
The story you're telling, was that spicy pie?
Yeah, Spicy Pie in Fargo was the story that.
If you go to fargowake.com and go, do you remember the month it was in? Probably November.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
October. Go back in the Fargo Wake magazine and there was a story on that particular case study with Spicy Pie and RJ Energy. It's a really informative article. It was really well done.
Yep, and actually there's one that's not here, but it's Payroll Express. Todd was one that he had. His utility bills in his office were extremely high. They were $700 to $100 a month, and he had a few people looking, but when you're just focusing on insulation, just focusing on windows, we seen that their air conditioning unit was in, their heating unit was in the wrong spot. It was in the attic with no insulation on it, so all that heat just goes out of the building and into the attic. By just insulating that, that'll save him about $300-400 a month just by.
Russell, do you go into like commercial buildings before they're renovated to tell them the best way to put an energy system in?
One of our big customers is Mark on the commercial side, and before they buy a building, they will have us do an analyzer building. We'll look at the mechanical system, we'll look at their insulation, their windows, and that way they have an idea of what they should budget for when they get into that building. And that's the same thing when we work with the colleges across the state. We will help them do their deferred maintenance budgets so they know what to budget for the next 5 to 10 years. But then we can also help them on their energy savings.
So Russell, one of the questions when you're doing some of this with your customers, do you help them set up specific metrics or KPIs so they can continually monitor to avoid overspending again?
Yeah, yes, we do. Actually, our first one, the one that put us into business was Maryvale. It was it's still kind of our signature project. We changed out their chillers, air handlers, their boilers, and what we did there is we were talking to them more about measuring productivity because they were just doing a lot of things of just continuing to adjust thermostats, continuing to turn just things that can be done automatically. So, and I don't want to put no discrimination on age, but they were older where they were saying, we've done this before. But since we put the controls in there and did different things, the first year of savings for natural gas was $12,000. And so, and their productivity, they were no longer turning boilers on and off and things like that. That was done automatically. So we were tracking it for about the first 3 or 4 months, but then they started tracking it, sending it to us instead. So it was kind of I like that story because when I go there, they're older retired nuns, and they're the ones that are always telling us that you don't know how bad it was before we got the system in here. So it's kind of
Could be a hero.
Yeah, it's kind of a cool story that they forget that we're the ones that were there when they were having problems. So yes, it is measured. I like it again when the customers send us stuff. We did an installation on a house in Moorhead, and and he was using three tanks of diesel fuel a year, fuel oil for heating his house. Now he uses 1. And I like that he sends us the pictures that there's still snow on his roof, but the neighbor does not have snow on his roof because all the energy is going through the roof. So.
Have you keyed in with any of the smart meters they're putting in town?
Yep, the smart meters we do we do with zone control contractors that we work with. We will have them put the smart meters in so that if a customer wants to see real time of what they're saving, they can do that. We do a lot of monitoring. We have a building in Bloomington, Minnesota, where we can see things happen before it happens. If you've got a customer that's 300 miles away, you want to let them know that something's going to happen with that system, a week or 2 before it actually happens. That way you're being more proactive instead of reactive. So.
Thanks, Russell.
Sarah, what's going on over at Hot Springs? How are you utilizing KPIs?
Hands are right over.
It's like it's yours, Jeremy.
It's yours.
So with a finance background, I'm more hung up on the quantitative stuff. We talked about the financial metrics. I'm sure the guys get tired of me talking about margins and net sales all day, top line and bottom line, but there's a whole lot of stuff in between that we discovered that we were doing so well over the last 3 years. So Mainly my focus this year is inventory purchasing. We may have $1 to $2 million inventory depending on high season, so obviously that's a problem moving it throughout the state from one warehouse in Fargo. So I'm looking at shrinkage rate, purchasing efficiency, minimizing freight costs, what else, truckload discounts, trying to get the best financing terms possible. Things like that is where I think I can help Vincent's Air out the most. What we do overlook a lot, I think we've got to start doing a better job of employee metrics, HR metrics, KPIs that we spoke about. Employee turnover ratio, I think there's a labor shortage in North Dakota. If you can't tell, I'm not from here. I thought it was a North Dakota problem, but after some research, it's a national issue. So if you plan to grow this year, you better be looking at hiring good people because there's not a lot of them. And that's the major thing with us, finding good quality people. It's when you're small, you can find 2 to 3 key people, but when you get to 40 to 50 people, the service labor market here is very difficult, and it's not just a North Dakota problem, it's everywhere. So salary competitiveness, are you paying your employees what the guy next door is? If not, we're coming after your guys, you're coming after ours, it's gonna become a problem. So, and just trying to figure out if your employees are happy, that's one big thing that we can get better at. We need to have if anyone can help us out there, a satisfaction survey to maybe get a gauge on maybe one department is better than the other. What can we do better in that regard?
Does anybody do employee satisfaction surveys? That does, do you do them electronically?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, Office Vibe is one that almost all my clients use.
Office Vibe.
Yeah.
Pulse is another one, I think.
Yeah. Tiny Pulse, Office Vibe.
Tiny Pulse, that's it. Yeah.
I was able to implement one probably almost 4 years ago, right after the match.
Yeah.
They let me do one run of it with our company. And out of 110 employees, I think we got 20 responses, and then the top guy said, "You're never doing it again."
Really? For what reason?
It turned into, everybody that wanted to complained.
Oh,
Nobody had
sure.
anything good to say. And he found no benefit to it, and I haven't been able to do another one.
Yeah. Now, on the other hand, I've got clients that have been using Tiny Pulse now, or one of them for 3 years. And I think the national average on that system is if you're running 7, because it's highly weighted, you're doing really well, they're running 9s. And their retention is extremely high. They don't have to advertise for positions. They've got them waiting at the door. But it's on their scorecard, it's one of their metrics they measure, and it's helped drive their culture to the point that they are one of the best places to work in, and people are flocking there.
I think that happens though, where up front it's a kind of complaint, and you just want to be heard.
Yeah,
But as
especially-
it goes on,
Yes.
So I just gotta convince them to
so
do
the
more.
cool thing about like Tiny Pulse, yeah, the cool thing about Tiny Pulse is you can give a survey and then the responses come in like anonymous, but whoever's receiving them can still reach back out to them, and they still have that anonymity, so that you can kind of fix some of those big problems without somebody feeling like they have to come and say like, I'm the one complaining.
So then like the HR person has access to the,
Yeah.
Whoever you can.
Whoever
reach
somebody,
out to.
yeah.
I think that initially, the first time it goes out, is common. I mean,
Right.
I was gonna say.
nobody likes getting those questions, but I think over time, that helps with employee retention because the employees feel like you actually care what they think and what their input is and their ideas and
And
how
they're
they're feeling.
responding.
And they're responding. Yeah.
Well, I mean, even bring that into a review aspect. I mean, not many people are going to go onto your business and brag about it. I mean, a lot of people will go on there to bitch about it. But the same thing goes with a company. I'm not going to come to you and say, you're a really poor manager to your face. But and if you don't have to say that to your face, I think that's going to come a lot easier. And you can obviously conquer that issue.
Yeah.
And if they are stressing out, it's good to know now instead of they get to such a point where they just letting them think that they're getting heard is going to help keep them. Because people want to feel like they're important enough to be heard.
What are you doing now, Jeremy? Anything for that employee feedback or?
Well, this year we started a system where you could leave suggestions in an anonymous email or box We're trying to get people to speak up, but sometimes they fear that it'll come back on them.
Right.
So we're working, we're not doing a lot, we need to do a lot more, but that's one little thing we've added this year.
You know, one of the challenges with feedback is if you're issuing the feedback, you need to be genuine and sincere about the fact that I want this feedback and I want to adjust my behavior as a result of it. If you're just going to get this feedback and not take any ownership on it and literally try to, who is it that said this? You know, I know who that was. If that's what it's for, or if that's the outcome of it, then it's a exercise in futility for sure.
And it has worked. This week I've gotten a few emails saying we should do this or that. So, it's working good.
And that's one thing to point out to the employees is to let them know ahead of time that the person is irrelevant. We don't care who sent the information, we just want to know the information.
What have you learned from it since you've been doing it?
We send out a 9-question deal twice a month. We have 100% participation of our staff. They'll ask them questions like, you know, where do you see yourself in the company? What are your goals? I mean, we talk about, you know, things that we can do better as a company, things that can do better individually. And I find that it's almost a paragraph answer for every question. It's been the same questions for 2.5 years I've been doing it. On top of that, I also meet with our staff twice a month for 15 to 30 minutes individually, and we talk about goals, things they need, things I can do better. I actually ask them to rate me on a 1 to 10 scale, and during those individual ones, I actually found that I got the most feedback. You know, and you know, that was really kind of started changing my mindset. I'm as a business owner, especially when you're on your own, you tend to micromanage. I don't know if anybody else does that as a problem, but that was 2.5 years ago. That was one of the things I really identified a lot, and I really worked hard on that. They seen that, and then they were more open to giving more and giving more suggestions, and they also took more ownership in their own issues. And I think that was where that, I guess, for us was a big one. So.
Yeah, there's an inherent concern with any employee that's filling out a feedback form that's going to go to management, even online. You know, yes, it's autonomous or anonymous, but the fact is that there's always this concern that somehow they're going to figure out that it came from me. And you know, a quick story on that. We're working with a company, energy broker, five partners in a limited partnership. Lot of dysfunction at the management level. Employees were petrified of the partners, would never get feedback, primarily because they didn't feel like it was going to do any good. These guys were just on their own, nothing's going to change this. And literally what I had to do as their consultant is to create a form and ask the questions. All of these were rated 1 to 10. You would circle your response. And literally to the point where I would hand this out to them with an addressed stamped envelope back to my address, so that they could circle the number, put it in there, walk downstairs, put it in a mailbox. It wouldn't even be handed to anybody internally. That's how scared these people were to give any feedback to the ownership. And quite honestly, they were right, because when I did compile the information and provided it back to them, the first response was, hey, am I better than the other partner? How do I rank in this? And actually, one thing I learned is don't give them the anecdotal information like the individual surveys, even though nobody's going to find out whose circle that was. If somebody circled a 2 and others were circling a 6, I know who circled that 2. So literally, it's a very delicate process. But again, if you're not receptive to this information, if it's not intended to help you grow as a business leader, then it's pointless. It instills more fear than anything.
So other than that, marketing KPIs, that's where we need to improve to. Social media footprint, that's huge now. Of course, everyone's doing it, but we could all do better, I'm sure. We invested a lot in the webpage, so we did invest in that last year, so we're improving from that aspect. And something I'm interested in as we open new stores is market growth rate. How much is Fargo growing compared to Minot? How many customers can you expect to have there, and are your sales increasing with that growth rate? So those are some of the things we look at in the retail world other than sales. So, you have anything to add to that, Ms. Sarah?
You can tell that's a Kentucky-based
You're right.
answer right there, right?
The
Well, I think
Southern thing.
Yes, the southern
We had the
thing.
southern breakfast for you this morning too.
Yes, very good.
No biscuit gravy.
I think way back when Vince and I first came to Fargo, we were small, less than 5, him and I, working in the showroom and all of that with delivery guys. He even delivered. We'd sell the hot tub and deliver it. And how we would grow from that to up to close to anywhere from 35 to 45 employees, it gets scary, you know, and it's the bigger you are, the more responsibilities you have, as we all know, and things like that. In the beginning, I don't think we tracked any of this knowingly. We didn't know it, like a lot of people that are small and stuff. So after that, as we kept going and growing and it got away from us, we were like, we need help. As I think you might be in that situation with sales and growing and all of that. But you're seeing it. We were always behind the 8 ball, I think, because Vince is the driving force, which is a shame he's not here, because he would be wrapping his brain around this and loving this stuff. So me, I'm not as good. I'm on the backside. I do the fluffy stuff. I'm the one that on the front side at the counter, the customer service, love to chat with the customers. Let's get you, because our whole motto is live well, live better, live every day better. And in a hot tub, make every day better. And that's where I come in, and then I try and do that with the staff. And I go to the different locations, and I'm the one that buys lunch. I'll go and get you coffee. I want to make everybody feel good, that kind of stuff. So on the backside, it's sitting down with them and discussing what's going on in your life. How can I help you be better at your job so we can all be better at the end of the day? And so that's where I come in on the KPIs. I don't knowingly do it, but I do it. So, yeah.
How long have you, 25 years in business, how long have you had someone with a CFO title?
Has it been 3?
3, maybe.
And
We've come a long way.
Jeremy's the first CFO.
Jeremy's the first.
Yeah. And that's what we talked about when you were going to be on this, is how big do you get, how, revenue, employee-wise, when you take those KPIs and put them on somebody else's desk and make that their responsibility. Of course, you're still going to watch them as an owner,
Oh, yeah.
but you're watching different things and let somebody else dive into the nuts and bolts, the 100 of them.
But
Depends on what type of owner you are.
Right.
That, we still watch them all personally every day.
I'd like to.
Yeah, I'd like to. Yeah.
Right. Well, and it's
But
like
if all of a sudden you have, if you're looking at 10 locations spread across the state over the next 10 years.
That's when a GM would come in and things like
Yeah.
that, so yeah, I do plan on opening one more,
Right.
so.
Yeah, and I think Jeremy and I can talk to that in terms of Vince is a salesman through and through. If anybody knows Vince, he's very passionate, and he always does the research on the backside for the products that we sell, and it's always going to be the number one. And he knows it inside and out, and he will know the competition better than anybody else, and he passes that information along to the sales staff, to working with Jeremy, and sometimes it's very frustrating because he's black and he's white. There's no gray, which, yes, so we can, right. So, and that's been the driving force. That's why we're where we are today, but he's not good at the numbers game. He watches it, but that's where we needed Jeremy. And we needed Jeremy probably 2 years prior to us actually getting him. So, I don't know, I kind of got off tangent on that, but I think we've all been in those shoes. I would think everybody here in this group started, you and your spouse or you and a business partner, and you start growing if you're independent, I should say, and then just grow. Because as Vince would say, and I love to hear him when he says this, if you're not growing, you're dying.
Right.
So how do you deal with, because you're saying like between the Minot store and the Fargo store and the Grand Forks store, each one of those has dynamic exterior factors. Minot has oil. Fargo has the biggest city in North Dakota. Grand Forks has all of these different dynamics that affect who's going to buy a hot tub. Because it's like a car salesman, everybody needs a car running. Or mechanic. Everybody needs a car running. So you always have the client base. It's just getting them to come to you. But with hot tubs, it's more of a, hey, we've got some extra money this year, let's go buy a hot tub. It's more of a,
Well,
we
yeah.
take it, it's more of a health and wellness program, I guess, marketing plan by Hot Spring themselves. So Vince bought into that years before, and I can say Vince changed the way they thought about hot tubs, the way he sold hot tubs in Fargo, North Dakota. No one else is doing it. We're doing the same thing Seattle's doing, Maine, Arizona, and we're doing it. We're covering a lot more territory doing it. But the way we've done that is the way they sold the product. It's not, this is a luxury item in your backyard. This is going to make you live longer. It's going to make you feel better. It's going to save your marriage. It's going to save your family. I got a text yesterday from a surgeon in Jamestown saying, thank you so much for forcing me into this hot tub, which I didn't force you out. Over a few bourbons one night, I convinced him to buy a hot tub, and he said, verbatim, this saved my marriage. He just had 3 kids. He's a surgeon. He's a busy guy. He sits in that every night, and he disappears.
So speaking from a hot tub and hot tubs, I met both these guys at lunch last week, and they were talking about saunas. I haven't done that. In fact, I was talking to Jake. Have you benefited from a sauna? And he told me all the benefits they got from a sauna. So I'm thinking, just that little word of how much it can better your life. I'm thinking, okay, we got to put a sauna in my house somewhere. I'm not sure yet where, but we need one of those. So it definitely works.
That's brilliant marketing to take something from that everyone perceived as a luxury product and now move it over to health and wellness. It's just like Mercedes, Volvo, Saab, they went from a luxury car to a safety car. I mean, that was part of their marketing campaign for, well, yeah, it's really expensive, but it's a really, really safe car. It'll save your life. That's a different campaign.
In 2014, we got out of the business of selling hot tubs and we got into making every day better. And you're only better, you don't get into the hot tub the same way you get out. You always get out better, every single time. I sit in my sauna every morning. It's an outdoor one. I sweat, I go outside when it's cold and it's freezing. Sometimes it's 15 seconds, sometimes it's 60 seconds. And then I'm back in, open up pores, release impurities and all of that good stuff. And then the same thing at night. I sit in my hot tub every single night and I sleep better. And I'm better for it. I'm better for Vince, I'm better for my employees, I'm better all the way around. That's my sales pitch, guys. You're better. If you're not sitting in it or feeling better, stress is the #1 killer.
But to answer your question, I think we skipped over that somehow.
Sorry.
Everything being better. You can't hold the store of Grand Forks the same standard as you do in Fargo, but you can grow. I mean, you can look at year over year what you did. January, February in Grand Forks alone, we grew 208%. So you can look at what they did last January and last February and hold them to those standards. So that's how we deal with that. And then the market growth rate that I talked about earlier, that's what I'm looking at. If Grand Forks is growing, we should be growing.
And you can create unique KPIs to different locations based on what decisions you want to make, what you want to change at that particular location. That's one of the things Brian talks about is a good KPI prompts decisions, not more questions. Yeah.
But you're exactly right. There are 4 different buyers between those 4 areas, and I'm learning more and more about North Dakota. This is my 3rd year here, but the buyer in Grand Forks is not the same buyer as you're seeing in Fargo. Is that what you were getting to?
Right, well, because earlier you had said, like, if Minot sells and Grand Forks feels like they should, and I'm like, well, but they're so completely different markets, how do you?
Yeah, we can still create some friendly competition. Say, what are you doing today, Blake? Down in Grand Forks, there's someone else. So.
And maybe also where those actual buyers are coming from. So that Grand Forks store probably isn't all Grand Forks residents, right? So you can also track where they're living, what maybe their comfort level is, and you can spend marketing dollars that way. Or hopefully someday you know where your next location could be based on where people are coming from.
Exactly, and pinpointing where they're coming from. Back to your question earlier. It's hard to get a sales guy to say, this wasn't me that did all this. Mm-hmm. So we can put Carson Wentz on the radio, we can do 8 trade shows, but the sales guy by nature wants to say he just walked in and I sold him. Mm-hmm. So to get your system to work, you have to have the salesperson tell you where that lead came from. And I can tell you we don't get that.
And the consistency too, it's not something you just do with one customer and then forget about it for the next 5. And we've had that issue a lot where you get the mindset of, yeah, let's track this, and you start doing it, and then it just falls off that.
Well, you gotta hold them accountable to do that, And to your comment too, like, yes, people need their car fixed, but I'm taking the hot tub away from them and making them put it under their car. So I've got a complete different system I'm fighting.
Right.
And then also to the location system, I picked that bar for a reason. You know, I looked at where my customers were coming from for both my stores and said, okay, this is actually the highest targeted market. And then I looked at what was available, and that's why I bought a bar. So, you know, at the end of the day, that's what I do. So locations are important. There was a lot of research that went into that, even for Fargo and Moorhead. And I can tell you the difference between Fargo and Moorhead is exponential. I think you can talk to that too. With the auto garage, he was in Moorhead for several years, and the customers in Moorhead are way different than the customers in Fargo. They spend differently. Their habits are different. I mean, it's crazy.
You're doing that on a real important point. And it's a real basic piece of marketing, which is, you know, even if you look at the 80-20 rule, 20% of your customers generally bring about 80% of your revenue, or some relativity to that. But the real point is, whether you're in Grand Forks or at Fargo, that 20% of the customers, they have commonalities. There are things that are like in that group. So the trick is to find out what are, of those 20% of the customers, what are the commonalities that they have? And then where are those people? Where do they read? Where do they shop? Where do they socialize? Those are the areas, those are the venues, those are the vehicles that you should use to market. Because again, this is about attracting good clients, not just clients.
One of the things that we did too to go off of that, we actually, this is kind of crazy, but we looked at our top 20% of our customers, and we actually just spent time and went on Facebook and looked at some of the stuff they do, and we also sent a letter to them saying, hey, you know, we love you as a customer, you're one of our best, would you mind filling this out? And we got probably 75% of those back as well. We kind of compiled, we asked them questions like, you know, what religion are you? Where do your kids go to school? And we found that, you know, different things that were in common with those people, and that's where people say I market a lot, but if you look at where I market, that's the reason I do it. So it has nothing to do with being a lot, but I'm doing a lot where it's important to my business.
And that's where ROI comes from in marketing.
And that's where you guys getting that marketing KPI in place is critical, because you've spent a lot of money in the last few years marketing. Website and signage and, you know, a lot of different areas. Now you gotta know what's
radio.
Lots of radio, yeah.
Yes.
How about with a few minutes we've got left, open it up to the floor. Anyone here using KPIs, didn't in the past, do now, the differences that you're seeing in your business? Who wants to speak to that? We've kind of.
It'd be really informal, but I mean, I started using KPIs and stuff with Brian when I
hired him on, and as bad as it sounds, I mean, I'm going on my 13th year, and I didn't even know what tracking your books really was. And it's crazy just to see, I guess, how myself has progressed over the past, couple of months of just seeing those numbers and acting to those numbers. So, I mean, it's definitely relevant, but and the growth that I've seen just from those short couple of months has been pretty substantial.
Anyone else?
I'll just mention one of my clients. We've got them on scorecards, a small service operation, and they were having cash flow issues. And one of the things that we really found out once they actually started tracking things was that their what they were charging per hour, they were actually losing $2 per hour in their shop. And that was their main finance driver. So you wonder why they have cash flow problems, type of things. But that's what the KPIs and stuff and the scorecards and metrics can do. They quickly adjusted to that, made changes. Their customers said finally, because they're actually wondering if they're going to go out of business. And in 3 months, they've gone from a negative cash flow to an extremely positive cash flow. And they said, you can't believe what you can do when you have money in the bank. But again, it doesn't really matter how big or small the company is. Same thing with one of our larger companies. When they put their scorecards in and really started working on it, they're a $50 million company. And they found another $300,000 in lost profits just off of their scorecard almost in the first month. So if you're not using metrics of some kind or tracking something, and again, like Roger was telling me, they revised yours, 8, 9 times? before they finally got it so it's really working well. But that process really tells you a lot about your company. So if you're not using metrics, if you're not using scorecards, you're not using KPIs, you're probably bleeding money and you don't know it.
Okay, and if your shirt's covered with blood, first thing you should do is, where's the blood coming from? Right? Where am I bleeding? Stop the bleeding first, and then refine and build those.
And ditch that car.
Exactly. Are we wrapping up, Kurt, or?
You good? You don't have any input? Financial guru?
Well, so as a business banker, I'm in a different place in my company. Of course, I have my own things that I'm held accountable to, and I'm not going to get into that. But seeing financials come in from different types of businesses, and you can really tell when someone is managing their. As a business banker, I can really tell when someone is looking very carefully at their KPIs and their gross margins and their financial statements. Believe it or not, some clients just don't have financial statements, and I don't know how you can run a business without them. And so this has been a great conversation to observe, and seeing everybody very excited about what they can do to enhance their business. And it does pay off, it really does. So kudos, I guess, is all I have to say.
I think there's very few, at least in the members of the 100, most of them it's not their first business, and very few people, their first time around, do financial statements, do balance sheets, do KPIs, all the things you're supposed to do. Is why their first one fails. They learn that, second time around, they do it better. It's common practice. Mr. Reed?
Sir.
Anything on your mind?
I guess.
David has Radiant Custom Homes,
Yeah.
unique industry.
Yeah, I think, probably a couple years ago, I wasn't sure exactly what questions to ask. And so I just kind of started with, okay, at the end of the day, I want to figure out, say, especially with looking at employees and how many people to employ and when to hire. Okay, how much money at the end of the day am I making off this employee? And I just started with that simple question, and then from there led to kind of drilling down into the stuff that Matt was talking about, like, okay, he's working this many hours in the year, and he's assigned this much revenue, or he brings in this much revenue. So for what he cost me versus how much revenue he's bringing in, is it worth it to have this guy? Or if we don't have him, can I manage that workload on my own? So, yeah, you may not even know that it's a KPI, but just figuring out what questions to ask and kind of drilling down into that information to find the answers.
That prompt decisions.
And a lot of times, it's surprising what you can control in your business once you drill down into those questions. And before that, I guess when I started a business, it kind of seemed like a whimsical, grand idea. And it's like, well, hopefully the money starts coming in some form or fashion. Not quite sure how that happens. But as you start to drill down and ask those questions and drill down into the information, that it's surprising how much you can control. There's certain factors you can't control, and sometimes you feel like at the end of the day, a lot of the problems can be solved by revenue. I just need more revenue. And then these problems will go away. So how do I get more revenue? Sometimes that aspect feels like you can't always control it, but so what are the things I can control? And so that's where you have to have these KPIs and these metrics to figure out what can I control in the business. And then it's surprising what you do actually have control of, even when you feel like there's certain things you can't control. You can't make people come in the door. You can't make them make these buying decisions. Right? There are things that you can.
Really well said.
Yeah. A couple people in the ag industry, speaking of can't control what's going on. Steve, you want to add anything? Steve's with the Dakota Packers up in Buxton.
Yeah, when you talk about lack of control, weather, and weather affected us tremendously last year. So then you do have to, cliche term, think out of the box. What else can you do? How do you adjust things? Where can you make cuts without cutting into bone? we're all running different businesses, but we're all in business, and some of the key metrics are gonna be the same, KPIs.
Then I think David hit it on the head, is that as the owner, you control the revenue and what your consumers do. It's up to you to introduce your product to them and get them in, and that's all driven by proper effective KPIs. But Richard's been at it a long time in the ag industry.
Yeah.
Now, Shane stepped up.
Shane.
I bet you do things differently now than you did when you started TRS.
Oh, yes. Yes, we've had a lot of changes in the last 34 years.
Yeah.
In the last 7 years, we've had a lot of changes, a lot of growth. We've diversified a lot. It's all tied into the turf industry, but you know, we're ag, we're marine, we're custom. So we do a lot of different things.
Hot tub covers.
Hot tub covers. We do repairs and such. Custom. We'll build curtains for Amity Technology, a lot of manufacturing companies in town. So, you know, like I was just saying earlier, if the grain prices would have been like they were 4 years ago, this egg industry would have just exploded, you know, with buying. But it didn't. You know, the high output of bushels in the crops made it to where these guys are doing kind of okay, but you know, but anyway, seeing that we're so diversified, you know, it's made us have a good year last year.
Yeah.
And so the KPI thing, we're doing some of it. You know, we do callbacks every so often. And the girls in the office like doing that because about 99.9% of our customers are happy with what we do. All right. So, you know, you get that response, and people, some of our people think that it's kind of a pain to do that, but yet the people that we call, very few don't want to be called. There's a high percentage.
Right.
Feel good that we call them back to see how they like their product or how the repair went.
Are you sharing those results with your whole team or just the people in the office?
I guess, and that's what Shane and I were just talking about a little bit ago, that we need to share a lot more than what we're doing because there's only a few people that know about what we're doing, and whether it's, you know, doing company meals or whatever, you know, the employee thing, or sharing with our supervisors where we are, if we're doing well or we're not so well. We need to share more because everybody needs to take a little bit of responsibility for what we're doing.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Since you stepped into management, Shane, is there anything that you looked at the way your folks did it years ago that you stepped in and just went, wow, I can't believe you guys never tracked this or watched this? Or
oh yeah. He's got a whole new attitude on business.
Yeah. Hey, one thing I want to throw out to you, as I mentioned earlier, the presentation that I did today, I'm going to provide that over to Kurt. He's going to send that out to you. One other thing that I have is it's just an Excel doc, but we'll send this out as well. It has 5 tabs on it, and each one of these tabs is a list of KPIs that you can consider for your business. I think one of the tabs is customer and sales. Might be 83 different KPIs on there. There's a HR tab on there. I think there's about 70 HR KPIs for you to just look at, read through, see if these are things that might be applicable to your business. So we make both of those things available to you through Kurt.